Okay, so if you run a small business, you know this feeling, right?
Yeah.
You're wearing about 50 different hats. Sales, marketing, HR, customer service, maybe even a chief plumbing officer sometimes. It's a lot. But there's one hat, this really specific one, you just can't afford to, like, grab and hope it fits.
Yeah.
And that's the legal hat.
Yeah, exactly. And it's surprising how many business owners just, well, they try to wing it, or they push off thinking about lawyers until, boom, there's a crisis, which is really why we're doing this deep dive today.
Absolutely. We're going deep into something that honestly can feel a bit complex, maybe intimidating, how to pick the right attorney for your small business. And we're basing this on some really solid source material excerpts from an article by Lehnes called How to Select an Attorney for Your Small Business.
Right. And our goal here isn't just to list, lawyer stuff. It's more about unpacking this whole process. We want to pull out the crucial advice from this article and hopefully give you a clear roadmap so you can handle the legal side proactively, not just, reactively when things go sideways.
Okay, let's kick things off with the big picture then, because I think for a lot of folks, hiring a lawyer feels like this emergency-only button, right? Like only when you're sued or facing disaster. Why does the source material really hammer home that every small business needs an attorney, maybe way earlier than people think?
That's such a key point right from the start in Lehnes' piece. It really stresses the proactive value. Think of it less like the ambulance waiting at the bottom of the cliff and more like the guardrail at the top. A good business attorney helps stop problems before they even begin. And that ultimately saves you massive headaches and, frankly, a lot of money down the road.
Preventing problems. Okay, I like the guardrail idea. But give me some concrete examples from the source. What does that actually look like day to day?
Well, okay, right from the absolute beginning, setting up your business, you might just think, oh, I'll be a sole proprietor, or LLC sounds good. But the article makes it clear an attorney helps you pick the right structure for your situation. Is it a sole proprietorship, an LLC that's limited liability company, maybe an S Corp, or a C Corp? These aren't just, alphabet soup. They have huge implications for your personal liability, how you're taxed, even how flexible you can be operationally. Getting it wrong early, that can be really costly to fix later on.
Okay, so getting that foundation right is critical. It's not just about picking the easy option.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just formation. Think about contracts. Every single agreement, whether it's with vendors, clients, your landlord for the lease, even partners or employees, they need to be solid. The article stresses that contracts need to be drafted, or at least reviewed, specifically to your advantage. Using some generic template you found online, or just not understanding key clauses, that can leave you really exposed.
Right, so it's not just having a contract, it's having one that actually works for you.
Precisely. And then there's protecting your unique stuff, your intellectual property, or IP. If you've got a unique product design, a brand name and logo you've built up, maybe some special technology. Securing that with patents, trademarks, or copyrights is absolutely vital. And doing that correctly, effectively, that takes legal expertise. Taking those steps proactively is a real investment in protecting your future growth and your brand.
Yeah, I can definitely see how protecting your brand name early on would be way, way cheaper than fighting someone who starts using it later.
Oh, immensely cheaper. The article also points out navigating the whole maze of compliance and regulations. You've got federal laws, state laws, local rules, impacting employment, environmental stuff, taxes, rules specific to your industry. Just staying on the right side of all that, it's critical, and an attorney is basically your guide through that maze.
Wow, yeah. Just hearing that list of regulations is enough to make your head spin if you're just starting out.
It is. And look, as your business grows, you naturally take on more legal risk. You start hiring people. Maybe you expand into new areas. You bring on partners. An attorney helps you see those risks coming and manage them effectively before they turn into actual problems.
And then, of course, sometimes stuff just happens, even with the best planning.
Right. And if you do face a dispute or, worst case scenario, actual litigation, having a lawyer who already understands your business, who's been involved, that is absolutely critical. They're your advocate. It significantly improves your chances of protecting your interests and getting a decent outcome.
Okay. So the why is super clear. It's about prevention, protection, peace of mind, not just putting out fires. Let's shift gears then to the when. What does the article flag as those key moments, those trigger points, when a small business owner should absolutely, definitely pick up the phone and call a lawyer?
Yeah. The source lays out several really critical phases and events where legal help is pretty much non-negotiable. As we just touched on, that initial formation and startup phase is number one. Making sure you choose that correct business structure right out of the gate.
Right, don't build your house on a shaky legal foundation. Makes sense.
Exactly. And then anytime you're drafting or reviewing contracts, and this isn't just at the start, it's for big client deals, agreements with key suppliers, that commercial lease for your space. You need these documents tailored, reviewed, specifically thinking about your advantage. Don't just glance over the boilerplate and sign.
I can see how busy owners might rush that part.
They do, and it's a huge risk. Hiring employees, that's another massive trigger point. Employment law is incredibly complex. It covers everything from how you recruit, what goes in the employee handbook, handling benefits correctly, and, critically, managing terminations legally. The article strongly advises getting legal advice before you make that first hire or any significant hiring moves.
Okay, wow. Hiring is definitely a big step with legal implications I hadn't maybe fully clocked before.
It's a huge one. Also, intellectual property protection. If your brand name, your logo, your unique product, your tech, if that's core to your business value, you need to lock it down legally. Trademarks, copyrights, maybe patents, don't put that off.
Yeah, like that bakery example we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Protecting the name is crucial.
Absolutely good foreshadowing. Moving on, as your business grows, compliance audits become really important. Think of these as proactive checkups. Are you following tax rules correctly? Zoning laws for your location? Data privacy stuff like GDPR or CCPA, if that applies. Even things like ADA compliance, making sure your business, physical or online, is accessible.
Okay, so like a legal health checkup to catch things early.
Exactly. Much better than waiting for a complaint or, an official audit from some agency. And finally, any really big structural changes like business sales, mergers, or acquisitions, buying or selling a business involves incredibly complex negotiations, due diligence, tons of legal paperwork. You absolutely need expert counsel for that.
Okay, so we know why we need a lawyer and when those really critical moments hit. But let's get practical. Lawyers specialize, right? What kind of attorney should you even be looking for?
Well, the article suggests that for most small businesses dealing with the everyday legal stuff, a general business attorney is usually going to be sufficient. They can handle the routine things, setting up your LLC or corporation, drafting or reviewing standard contracts, basic compliance questions, advising on common business issues.
Got it. So they're kind of like your primary care physician for legal stuff.
That's a great analogy, actually. They're the versatile player on your team. However, the source material is also very clear that depending on your specific industry or if you have really particular needs, you might need to bring in specialized attorneys.
Okay, so when would that typically happen? What kind of specialists are we talking about?
Well, if you've got significant issues with your workforce, hiring, firing, policies, you'd probably want an employment lawyer. If your whole business revolves around unique inventions, branding, or tech, then an intellectual property IP attorney is essential. Really complex financial setups might call for a tax attorney. If you think you might get sued or you need to sue someone, you need a litigation attorney. Problems with your office lease or property, real estate attorney. And if you're looking at franchising your business or buying a franchise, you definitely need a franchise lawyer.
Okay, so start general, but know when you might need to call in the cavalry, the specialist.
Exactly. And the article also touches on that decision between using a larger law firm versus maybe a solo practitioner or a smaller firm. Bigger firms might offer that convenience of having lots of specialists under one roof, but yeah, their rates can definitely be higher. Solo lawyers or smaller firms often give you more personalized service, maybe more flexible fee options, and you're probably dealing directly with the main attorney more often.
Right. Pros and cons to weigh there, depending on your needs and budget. Okay, so you've got an idea of the type of lawyer. Now, the million-dollar question, how do you actually find candidates? And then, crucially, how do you vet them to make sure they're the right fit?
Yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road. The source material gives some really practical steps. First off, referrals. Ask other business owners you trust, especially people in your industry or your local area. Who do they use? Who do they recommend? Getting that word-of-mouth insight from someone who's been there, that's invaluable.
Yeah, getting a recommendation from someone running a similar business feels like a really smart place to start.
It really is. Then you can explore professional directories. The article mentions resources like Martindale-Hubbell, AVO, maybe the American Bar Association's directory. Think of these as like specialized search engines or review sites just for lawyers. You can often filter by specialty location and sometimes even see peer ratings or client reviews.
Okay, so like Yelp, but for lawyers.
Kind of, yeah. Also, don't forget your local business networks, your local Chamber of Commerce, the SBDC, that's the Small Business Development Center. They offer free counseling or even local networking groups. They often have lists or can point you to attorneys familiar with the local scene.
Good point. Find someone who knows the local landscape.
Definitely. And for businesses maybe on a tighter budget or really early stage startups, the article suggests looking into legal incubator programs. These are often connected to law schools or nonprofits. They provide access to newer attorneys, usually supervised, who offer more affordable legal services specifically to startups and smaller businesses.
Oh, that's a fantastic tip for bootstrap businesses. Okay, so you've done your homework, you've got a list of names. How do you go from that list to finding the right person, the right partner?
Right. This is the vetting stage, and it's critical. First, really dig into their qualifications and experience. Are they actually licensed in your state? That's basic, but check it. More importantly, do they have real demonstrable experience working with businesses like yours? And don't be afraid to ask direct questions. How long have you specialized in business law? Have you worked with companies in my specific industry before? Have you handled the kinds of issues I think I might face?
So look beyond just the law degree and license. You want relevant, practical experience.
Exactly. Also, try to understand their approach. How do they explain things? Can they break down complex legal stuff into plain English you actually understand? Or do they just drown you in jargon? Do they seem like they want to collaborate, or do they kind of talk down to you? The article flags it as a potential red flag if an attorney seems only focused on billing hours right from that first chat.
Yeah, that's a good gut check. If they can't explain it clearly now, imagine trying to work with them when things get complicated.
Totally. Then evaluate communication. How quickly do they usually get back to people? Who's going to be your main point of contact? Is it the experienced lawyer you're talking to now, or will you mostly deal with paralegals or junior lawyers? You need to set expectations about communication early on.
Makes sense. Clear communication up front saves a lot of frustration later.
And this one is absolutely critical. Ask about fees up front. Transparency here is just non-negotiable. You need to understand their billing structure. Is it hourly? Is it a flat fee for certain things? Do they work on a retainer? If it's hourly, what are the billing increments? Do they bill in 6-minute chunks or 15-minute chunks? That can add up fast. Ask about retainers, how much is needed up front, and what exactly does it cover?
It really sounds like you need to treat that initial consultation like an interview, where you're the one doing the hiring. Yeah. You're assessing them.
You absolutely should be. The article even points out some red flags for you to watch out for during these initial meetings. Like, if an attorney guarantees a specific outcome, ethical lawyers just won't do that. Or if they rush you into making decisions, if they can't clearly explain their advice or process, or if they get cagey when you ask about fees or their experience.
Trust your gut if something feels off.
Definitely. And finally, please don't skip this step. Ask for references. Talk to maybe 2 or 3 of their current or past small business clients. Ask about their experience. Were they responsive, reliable? How do they handle challenges?
Yeah, getting that real-world perspective from other business owners seems invaluable. Okay, let's tackle the elephant in the room, the thing that makes a lot of people hesitate. The cost. Understanding and budgeting for legal fees.
Right. It's often the big hurdle, but the article really frames it as a necessary investment, not just an expense. It outlines the common ways lawyers bill. Hourly billing is probably the most traditional. You pay for the time they spend working on your stuff. Rates vary based on their experience, location, the complexity of the work.
Which can feel a little unpredictable for budgeting, though.
It can, yeah. That's why flat fees can be really good for specific, predictable tasks. Things like forming your LLC, drafting a standard employment agreement template, reviewing a simple lease. You know the exact cost up front, which is great for planning your budget.
Predictability is definitely golden for small business finances.
For sure. Then you have retainers. This is basically an upfront payment you make, kind of like a deposit that the lawyer holds in trust. They bill their hourly fees against that amount. It essentially guarantees you access to their time when you need it. If you use up the retainer, you might need to replenish it. Contingency fees, where the lawyer only gets paid if you win, usually a percentage of the recovery. You see that a lot in personal injury cases, but it's pretty rare in general business law, maybe only for certain kinds of lawsuits.
Okay, so mostly hourly, flat fees, or retainers for the usual small business stuff. Now, here's a question. Can you actually negotiate these fees?
The article says yes, absolutely ask. Don't be shy about asking if they offer any discounts for startups or small businesses, or if maybe you can bundle common services together for a better rate. Some attorneys are definitely open to discussing fee arrangements, especially if it looks like you'll need ongoing help.
Good to know there might be some wiggle room there.
Ultimately, though, the source material really emphasizes thinking about legal costs, not just as another bill, but as an essential line item in your budget, like insurance for your business's health.
Yeah.
Because skimping on proper legal advice now, as those case studies will get to show, it can end up costing you exponentially more later if you hit a legal snag.
That really does shift the perspective from cost to smart investment.
Exactly. And once you make that investment, find the right person, the article talks about building a real partnership, a long-term relationship. It's not just a one-and-done transaction.
So how do you make that relationship work well over time?
Well, the best way, according to the article, is to genuinely treat your attorney like a strategic partner. Keep them in the loop on major business decisions or changes early, ideally before you've fully committed. The sooner they get a heads up about what you're planning, maybe expanding to another state, launching a new product line, the sooner they can spot potential legal issues you might completely miss.
Right. Don't wait until after you've signed the lease or shipped the product to tell them.
Please don't. And maintain clear communication. Set expectations right away. How often will you touch base? What's the best way to reach them? How fast do you need responses? How will billing updates work? Scheduling regular check-ins, maybe quarterly or twice a year, even if things seem quiet, can be really beneficial as your business changes over time.
Sounds like a standing legal strategy meeting.
Precisely. And a really key recommendation from the source is to put an annual review schedule in place for your critical legal documents. Your formation docs, key contracts, employee handbook, compliance policies. Laws change constantly, your business evolves, your legal paperwork needs to keep up.
That annual review makes so much sense. Laws aren't static, and neither is your business. Okay, now let's address the siren song of those online legal services. When do platforms like LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer make sense, and when are they just not enough?
Yeah, the article tackles this really well. Look, those online platforms can be useful tools for certain very basic routine tasks.
Like setting up that initial LLC, maybe?
Yes, exactly. Or maybe filing a really straightforward trademark application for your brand name. Or generating a super basic boilerplate contract template for something very simple and low risk. For those specific standardized tasks, they can be a cost-effective way to get started.
But the article definitely doesn't position them as a substitute for a real live attorney, right?
Oh, absolutely not. The source is crystal clear on this. These platforms do not replace the need for personalized legal advice that's tailored to your specific business, your industry, your unique situation. They provide templates, they provide automated filing, they don't provide counsel, they don't give strategic advice, they can't represent you in a negotiation or a dispute, they can't tell you the best legal structure considering your specific tax situation, or review a complex commercial lease to make sure it protects your interests, or help you navigate a tricky employee termination.
Okay, so useful for like basic plumbing, but you wouldn't hire them to design a house or fix a major leak in the foundation?
That's a perfect way to put it. The article talks about knowing when to upgrade. As your business grows, as it hits certain milestones, maybe you hire your first few employees, you develop significant intellectual property that's core to your value, you start operating across state lines, you're handling much larger contracts, your legal needs just become more complex, they outgrow what those online platforms can handle. That's the point where you absolutely need dedicated, personalized legal counsel from an experienced attorney.
That draws a pretty clear line. Okay, to really hammer this home, the article includes a few really compelling, kind of scary case studies showing what happens when businesses don't get the right legal help.
Yeah, these are powerful illustrations. There's the story of the bakery. They built up a really popular local brand, great reputation, but they never formally trademarked their business name. Then a larger company expanded into their city using the exact same name. And that company did have a registered federal trademark. The end result. The original bakery was forced to completely rebrand everything. They lost years of goodwill they'd built up and spent a fortune on news signs, packaging, websites, marketing, everything.
Wow. Just wow. A relatively small cost for trademark filing up front could have saved them all that pain and expense.
Exactly. They missed protecting that core piece of their identity. Then there's the case of the contractor. He used a free, generic contract template he found online for a big job. When a major payment dispute erupted with the client and it ended up in court, he lost the lawsuit. Why? Because that generic template wasn't customized, it didn't cover his specific services properly, it lacked crucial payment terms, and it didn't comply with specific state laws required for contractor agreements in his area.
Ouch. So that free contract ended up costing him way, way more than paying a lawyer to draft a solid one in the first place.
Precisely. Contracts have got to be specific to your business, your industry, and where you operate. And finally, there's the story of the retailer who kind of dragged their feet on getting legal advice when they started hiring employees. They ended up facing a wrongful termination lawsuit from someone they let go. They had to settle for thousands of dollars, their big mistake. Not having proper legally sound employment policies, procedures, and documentation in place right from the start, exactly what a lawyer would have helped them set up.
Man. 3 very different businesses, bakery, contractor, retailer, but the same fundamental lesson, isn't it? Skipping or delaying legal advice isn't really saving money. It's taking on potentially massive, even business-ending risk. These are just theoretical worries.
No, they are very real risks, and those stories really underscore why that upfront, proactive investment in good legal guidance is just so critical for long-term survival and being able to grow safely.
Okay, so to make this really practical for everyone listening, the article wraps things up with a super helpful quick action checklist, basically summarizing the key steps we've talked about.
Yeah, it's a great distillation of the whole process. Let me run through the points. First, really sit down and figure out your specific legal needs right now based on your business stage and what industry you're in. Second, ask around for those referrals from other business owners you trust. Third, do your research using those professional directories and online reviews we mentioned. Fourth, double-check their credentials and, crucially, their relevant experience with businesses like yours. Fifth, make sure you interview several potential candidates. Don't just go with the first person you talk to. Sixth, ask really clear, direct questions about their pricing and how they bill right away. Get that transparency. And here's a really useful tip from the source. Maybe consider starting with just a small defined project, like having them review one specific contract just to see how you work together before you commit to a big ongoing relationship. Then, obviously, once you find that right fit, focus on building that long-term partnership. And finally, schedule those annual legal checkups to keep all your documents and policies current.
That is a really solid step-by-step guide anyone can start using today.
Look, choosing an attorney for your small business, it isn't just some bureaucratic chore or an expense you wish you didn't have. It's truly a critical investment. It's an investment in your business's long-term health, its stability, and its ability to grow with confidence. It really is about building a necessary partnership.
Yeah, it really sounds like it's one of the cornerstones of building a well-managed, resilient business.
So maybe the final thought to leave everyone with, especially thinking about those case studies, ask yourself this. If the potential cost of not having good legal counsel can literally cripple or even sink your business, how does that change your perspective on the cost of having proactive, expert legal guidance right from the beginning?
That is a powerful question. Definitely something to chew on. Take these steps, explore your options, and invest wisely in the legal foundation of your business.